When was the last time you truly felt the wild, unbridled creativity of the internet? Long before the polished, sterile walls of modern social media, the web was a digital Wild West. It was a place where a single person could create an entire universe from their bedroom. And the engine behind that revolution? It wasn't a search engine or a social network. It was a simple, lightweight plugin called Adobe Flash. At its peak, Flash was installed on over 99% of all internet-connected computers. It powered the first viral videos, the most addictive browser games, and the flashy experimental websites that defined an entire generation's digital childhood. We're talking about a piece of software that didn't just change the web, it was the web for nearly 2 decades. But like many titans of tech, its rise was as spectacular as its eventual, brutal fall. This is the story of how one piece of code became the most loved and most hated technology in history. It began as a dream of digital ink and ended as a security nightmare that even Steve Jobs couldn't tolerate. Welcome to the rise and fall of the Flash empire. The story of Flash doesn't actually begin with Adobe. It begins in 1993 with a man named Jonathan Gay and a tiny company called Futurewave Software. Their first product wasn't meant for the internet at all. It was called Smart Sketch, a drawing program designed for the Pen OS, an early, ill-fated attempt at tablet computing. When the tablet market tanked, Jonathan and his team realized they had something special, a vector-based drawing engine that was incredibly memory efficient. Unlike traditional images made of pixels, vectors are mathematical formulas. This meant you could scale them to any size without losing quality, and the file sizes remained tiny. As the World Wide Web began to crawl into homes via slow, screeching dial-up modems, Futurewave pivoted. They added basic animation features and rebranded the software as Future Splash Animator. In 1996, a giant came knocking. Macromedia saw the potential and acquired the company, shortening the name to simply Flash. Suddenly, the silent, static web was about to get a lot louder. For the first time, developers had a tool that allowed them to ship high-quality animation over a 56K modem. The bottle was open, and the genie was out. By the early 2000s, Flash became the language of the internet's creative class. It was the birth of the Flash portal. Sites like Newgrounds, Armor Games, and Congregate became the digital playgrounds for millions. Remember Alien Hominid, Meat Boy? Those weren't just games, they were the proof of concept for the indie game revolution. Flash democratized development. You didn't need a massive studio or $1 million budget to reach an audience. You just needed a quirky idea and a copy of the software. But it wasn't just about games. Flash gave us the first iteration of internet culture. This was the era of Badger Badger Badger, Charlie the Unicorn, and Salad Fingers. It was weird, it was experimental, and it was completely lawless. Flash effectively turned every browser into a powerful multimedia engine, capable of playing music, video, and complex interactions. In fact, when 3 former PayPal employees decided to build a site for sharing videos in 2005, they chose Flash to power their player. That site was YouTube. Without Flash, the video-sharing giant might never have survived its infancy, because there simply wasn't another way to play video reliably across different web browsers. At this moment, Flash was the undisputed king of the digital world. In 2005, Adobe purchased Macromedia for a staggering $3.4 billion. They now owned the crown jewel of the web. But beneath the surface, the cracks were forming. Flash was a proprietary system, a walled garden, in an ecosystem that was moving toward open standards. As Adobe pushed more and more features into the plugin, it became bloated. It was notorious for hogging RAM and crashing browsers. More dangerously, Flash became a Swiss cheese of security vulnerabilities. Because it was installed on almost every computer, it was the perfect target for hackers. A single flaw in the Flash player could give a malicious actor complete control over a user's machine. Adobe found themselves in a perpetual game of cat and mouse, releasing patch after patch, but the fundamental architecture was aging. The web was evolving, but Flash was still built on a foundation from the 90s. It was a heavy, clunky giant trying to keep up with a world that was starting to move faster than it could handle. The very thing that made the web exciting was now becoming the thing that made the web unstable. The crown was getting heavy, and a revolution was brewing in Silicon Valley. April 29, 2010. That is the date the execution order was signed. Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple, published an open letter titled Thoughts on Flash. In 1,600 scathing words, Jobs dismantled Adobe's prized possession. He argued that Flash was unreliable, insecure, and a battery killer. But the real reason was deeper. The mobile revolution had arrived. Jobs refused to allow Flash on the iPhone and iPad. He claimed it was a legacy technology that didn't belong in the era of touchscreens and low-power mobile processors. Adobe fought back, launching a massive PR campaign accusing Apple of being anti-competitive. But the damage was done. When the most influential hardware company in the world tells the public that your tech is trash, people listen. Jobs pushed for HTML5, an open standard that could do much of what Flash did, but natively, without a plugin. Developers faced a choice: keep building for the dying desktop web with Flash, or embrace the mobile future with HTML5. The shift didn't happen overnight, but the writing was on the wall. The iPhone didn't just ignore Flash, it made it irrelevant. Information was moving to the pocket, and Flash was simply too heavy to make the trip. The decade following the iPhone's launch was a slow, agonizing decline for Flash. Chrome, Firefox, and Safari began to disable the plugin by default. Users were forced to click through multiple warnings just to play a simple game or view an animation. It was the click-to-play era, the digital equivalent of a condemned sign on a building. Adobe eventually saw the inevitable. In 2017, they made the announcement that many had expected but few were ready for. Flash would be officially retired at the end of 2020. No more updates, no more downloads, and eventually, the software would block itself from running entirely. It was a rare moment in tech history, the planned death of a foundation. Organizations began the frantic work of Flash preservation. Projects like Blue Maxima's Flashpoint and the Ruffle emulator raced to save hundreds of thousands of games and animations from becoming unplayable digital ghosts. These weren't just files. They were the cultural artifacts of the early internet. On December 31st, 2020, the lights finally went out. Browsers around the world removed the code, and billions of lines of creative work were suddenly silenced. The king was dead. So, was Flash a failure? Far from it. While its end was messy, Flash was the training wheels for the modern internet. It taught a generation of creators how to animate, how to code, and how to tell stories in a digital medium. The developers who started by making simple games in Flash are the same ones who went on to create the massive, polished apps and games we use today. The legacy of Flash lives on in HTML5, CSS, and WebGL. These technologies are faster, safer, and open, but they were born out of the necessity to replace the miracle that Flash once was. Flash proved that the web didn't have to be static text and blue hyperlinks. It could be cinematic, it could be interactive, and most importantly, it could be fun. The lesson of Adobe Flash is one of cycles. Technology must either adapt or perish, and no matter how dominant you are today, someone, somewhere, is building the open standard that will eventually replace you. We traded the creative chaos of Flash for the security and efficiency of the modern web, but in that trade, we lost a little bit of the internet's soul. Flash was the tech that built the web, and in its beautiful, broken way, it defined the digital frontier. I hope this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the strategies and the relentless mindset behind these global icons. If you enjoy deconstructing business empires and tech legends in this Tech Archive style, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. That way, you will never miss a new blueprint of history. For those of you ready to explore more boardroom coups and technological breakthroughs, I have handpicked 2 videos for you right here on the screen. Click one to keep watching. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.